Hey, you guys, welcome back to episode. Is it four? It's five. Episode five of Let's Talk About It. So, today I want to talk about hyper independence. Um, I feel like this really stems back to like childhood, really. So, just take a journey with me for a second. When we think of being independent, typically people really think of it as such a powerful thing. We want to teach independence. We want everyone to be able to take care of themselves and their families and I mean that is the goal, right? Not to be dependent on others always. But is it the goal? Is this to a fault sometimes? And why does it happen? Where is it coming from? So I want to think back to like childhood. And when you're in a family, think about the dynamic. If you're in a two-person household and it's more of a dad's working, mom's at home, and it's a dictatorship, the children are going to grow up with a certain thought process. Roles may also be very gender specific in those situations. Not that it's bad, just saying it could be that way. Then think about a two-parent household where everything is equal. Mom and dad are home, mom and dad both work, everybody like contributes to the household financially and with taking care of the household, like, chores and things of that nature. And think about how that puts an impression upon children. And it still could very much have a hierarchy system in that or not. Think about when finances are discussed in front of children. Think about how critical that could be to their little minds and what they think. This is my money. You can have an allowance. And this is between the adults. This is what they are observing between the adults. Or think about a household where it's our money. Mom and dad are going to have to discuss that before we make any decisions. And it's never not seen but our money. Okay. Think about a single parent home where maybe there's some triangulation. That's a big old fancy word that I almost tripped over here. That's basically meaning that this parent doesn't co-parent with the other parent and the child's the middle person, right? So it's a triangle. That's a whole nother podcast, but I want you to think about, well, actually parent alienation could also be a topic in that situation. Oh, so and so didn't pay their child support, so we can't get that. Rather than that's just not in the budget. So it's the same thing. There's no money for whatever is needed, whether it's a need or a want, but how we're delivering that to the child. That also impacts the parents, right? If we look at it like it's just not in the budget right now, rather than looking at it like this person didn't give me what they were supposed to give me to care for our child. And so now we can't have that. That brings a whole different energy, right? And we can control that energy. That is for us to control how reactive we are. Also, another podcast topic is how we react to things. So, circling back to talking about the entire idea of independence and where it comes from. So we have all these different scenarios of how we could be raised as children, right? When we are raised in a home that is single parent, a lot of times the child becomes independent at a much earlier age for lots of reasons. Maybe the parent that is home has to work more than one job, or maybe there's multiple children and the older child acts as, I don't want to say a parent, but sometimes that typically does happen. They have more parental roles because that's just, that's the family dynamic that you're living through. So in these situations, you have children that become independent much earlier. Is that a bad thing? No, not really. I mean, to be able to, clean up after yourself or help clean the house and contribute, those are all really positive qualities to have. However, we also want our children to have a childhood. So there is a balance for sure. And the children that grow up in two parent households can have that level of independence also. But it might be more so because they need to learn that, and they're being taught this to just be a good human, to learn responsibility, and it's just part of, like, they're maturing, rather than the actual need in the family. And so it's probably going to be interpreted differently by the child. All these things preset in our little brains when we're that age, how we see things, what we're hearing. There's no money. You need to make sure you do A, B, and C, so when you get to this point, you won't need money. You won't need to rely on somebody else. You can just take care of yourself. So we don't realize as parents that we are pushing these agendas upon our children, because it just seems kind of very natural to have those conversations or even speak those words out loud to ourselves, and little ears hear, or teenage ears hear interpretations, happen at all different ages. So I want you to think about that. Now that we've kind of encompassed all the different ways that children could seek independence in childhood, or why it could be bestowed upon them, now let's move up. Now we're teenagers and we need a good job. Okay? So it could be so many things actually, now that it's kind of flooding my brain. You could have a two-parent household that has more than enough money and they don't want their kids to work. So they just everything's given to them. This could be a wonderful thing with much gratitude behind it, or it could really earmark these children to feel entitled and things should be this way. And then the lack of independence, because they never really had to do without, they never really had to request, it was just always given to them. And then you have children who are in two parent households or one parent households who have to work in order to have the same things as their peers, possibly, that are being given these things. Um, so independence looks different as a teenager. And I have opinions about all of them, to be very honest with you. And I think that parenting, it's different for everybody. Every kid is different. I think we don't even realize, although we may have like how we parent in our heads, uh, we still parent differently for each child that's in our home, even if the setup's the same. We don't realize that we do it, but we do it because we are different ages as we're raising these children, and their personalities are different. Whereas one child may really be very compliant, the other child may be very rebellious. Therefore, your parenting is going to have to be different in order to communicate with them effectively, and to get maybe the kind of results that you're looking for your children. Okay, so moving into your 20s, late teens, early 20s, I it was so ingrained in me personally to get an education. You can't be anything without an education. I think every generation, when you were at that age of graduation from high school, everybody is different. Every generation has been different. Whereas back in the day, maybe they were going off to the military and that's just what you did. Or down here, maybe you were just going offshore because that is the way of life down here. And in different areas, different things. Maybe you live on a farm and the way of life is that you are on the family farm and you're taking over the family farm. Like, education wasn't an option. Then I feel like it might have become just like expected, right? We're going to go to college. I don't even know what I want to do, but I'm going to go to college. And so that's a parenting that's different for parents now, right? Do they need to go to college? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go to trade school? Do you not care what they do, as long as they get out and you are pushing the agenda of, like, you graduated, sink or swim time. Every parenting technique is very different for all people, and I don't say any of them are wrong because it's not my place to say at all. Um, However, when it comes to being independent and that following you in to your adulthood, I want you to think about hyper independence and what that looks like. So when you were raised in a situation where um, there was no real reliability upon the adults in the home, maybe there was very little money, maybe your parents were absent, or maybe one parent was absent, both, one, whatever. Um, and you heard a lot of, I can't rely on that person, or they're bad with money, or there is no money, or you need to make sure that you can take care of yourself. Don't rely on anybody, blah, 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 blah. If that's where your head was brought up the whole time, then now you have been created to be hyper independent, and you could very much get tunnel vision. And although for some that may be fine, if you don't ever want to be in a relationship and you just want to be a fully independent person, that could be 100% fine. But I really want to dig into this. Being hyper independent can also create a lot of barriers. So if you are a person who feels like you cannot rely on anybody, what do you feel like that is going to translate inside of a relationship? Relationships are supposed to be built on trust and reliability of one another. That is part of the purpose. And if everything is, this is mine, this is yours, you the balance isn't going to be there. And listen, I did it myself. And I got to be honest with you. My childhood, I was very much brought up to be like, rely on yourself, rely on yourself. There's lots of reasons why, lots of complicated trauma things there. And then I got into my 20s, got into these relationships um, where I relied and I got burned. And then what does that do? All that does is build on top of what was built in my childhood. Don't rely on anybody. See, somebody just failed you. See, what I told you was right. But is it? Is it right? For some, it may be. And that is okay. When you are working with a couple and when you are thinking about relying on one another, could you find a middle ground? I think so. I think there's always a middle ground if you want there to be. Being hyper independent, you can have independence inside of a relationship within reason, for sure. But it will probably not always flourish inside a relationship. I bring up this topic to because I think it's so important. I think that we have lost sight of what once was tradition, and I think there's balance for both. I think there's balance for all, really, if we allow it. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. I do think that it's a beautiful thing to watch a very, what we would call, I'm going to label as traditional thought process of a family from back in the day. There is absolutely nothing wrong if you want to be in a dynamic where you have someone who works outside of the home and then someone who is the caretaker inside of the home. Both of you guys are working, right? And that's the way it is looked at. Allowing someone to be into their masculinity and into their being the provider, and someone to be allowed to be in their feminine, and how the infusion of that is such a beautiful thing. I don't think that this day and age, unfortunately, financially, everybody can do that. However, I still think that there is a balance, and I think it comes from within, and being secure in your relationship and secure in yourself to really be vulnerable and to say, I really do enjoy doing this. It doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me needy. It doesn't make me super dependent, but it also allows me to be in this, what I have developed, this relationship. Relationships are not meant to be hyper independent. And I get it. People fail us. We fail ourselves. I get it. It's scary. I get all of it. I really do. And I really believe that if we allow ourselves to think about what we truly, truly want, like our personal self, instead of worrying about what the outside world is telling us. So, for instance, if our parents' mistakes and their fears translated into how they parented us, okay? Now we have been raised with their fears. Our parents have so we don't realize, but they have so much skin in the game. They really do. Our environment is so critical. Even when you hear all these, I don't care what my parents said. Da, 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 da. Oh, you did. Oh, it's in there. It's ingrained in there to an extent. Can we break a cycle? Absolutely. Can we do something different than what our parents did, our grandparents did? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we can make the decisions. And that is okay. So that I bring this whole topic up really to tell you that it is okay if you want to live a very independent singular life. 100%. You want to be career driven, you want to live like this is mine, mine, mine. That is okay. Like so okay. But no, it comes with a cost. No, it comes with a cost. If you bring the hyper independence into a relationship, and maybe that person was not raised to like have that battle that yours and nothing's ours. Okay? There's going to be friction. Who's wrong, who's right? But just know when we choose to be in a relationship with somebody, we choose to make decisions as a unit. We can still have our independence, things we like, the other person doesn't always have to like, and vice versa. But when it comes to big things that really are foundations of relationships, it's critical to have those conversations. Not dictatorships, conversations. You're a team. If your team decides that there's a hierarchy, then that's cool. That's you signed up for that. Y'all signed up for that. Let me correct myself. Y'all signed up for that. But if that's not the way you want it, then you have to navigate through, and everybody's units are going to look different, and that's okay. I also think it's okay to grow and change. Because of how I was raised in my 20s, I was hyper independent. Then I started to question it, allowed myself to be a bit vulnerable, got kind of smacked in the face with it, went back to being probably hyper independent tenfold, and struggled with that. In my marriage, really going into it, wanting this unity, wanting these things, but the fear was still there. When we get defensive, a lot of times that's built from fear or insecurities, both of which were true in my case. As I have grown and developed and communicated and in my marriage and myself, I have learned that I actually really love certain parts of my life to just be completely trusting and I don't want to say dependent because I don't know that that's the right word to use, but allowing myself to engage in what would be a more traditional feminine place. And that's not always true in every facet of my life. I played so many different roles, but in some, I really like it. And I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. And that's okay too. I don't know what I'll say tomorrow, and it might have not been what I said 5 years ago, but today that's where I'm at. And that's okay. It's okay to be there. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to grow. But I will tell you this, in order to do those things, you really have to communicate with your partner. You really have to communicate with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. And you have to let go of what other people think and say. As you continue to grow and learn, if you take in less and less of what society is saying you should be like, you're going to be happier. Have you really ever truly sat with yourself and just thought, like, what brings me total joy? Instead of putting a label on it, right? Of being like, oh, I'm hyper independent. I can pay all my bills by myself. If somebody left me tomorrow, my life wouldn't have to change. I've thought those things before. They were all fear based, though. And they do come from trauma. They come from losing everything. They come from somebody who I was supposed to be able to trust to take it all away. It's true. It's true. And the idea of never trusting again was not part of what I wanted to sign up for. It was to learn to trust myself and my spouse. It was learning that other people's mistakes should not bleed onto my new relationship back then, because it's not new now. Really sitting in those roles is okay. Like, I've sat with myself, and I started baking bread for my son's health, actually. And I thought to myself, man, I would have never thought I would have found so much joy in baking sourdough bread. It really brings me joy to be able to make such clean food for my family. I never thought that I would say that. I'll sit and crochet during the holidays if I have time. They say I am a maman in my soul. I'm okay with that. I embrace it. I also love to fish. I also go cut my grass. I'll clean. I'll do all these things that are really interchangeable. They need done. I don't have to fit in such a certain box. But I also like to be cared for. I like my husband to care for me. I like my children to care for me. I like my kids to open the doors for me. I also like those things. And I am completely okay saying that I like those things. So when we think about people who are being hyper independent, and maybe there's resistance in your relationship, rather than butting up against it, trying to push the agenda of stop doing that or that's so annoying, why not step back and simply just have like a real clarifying conversation? Like, what are we scared of if we were to make this change? Is there a smaller step in between? Let's try this. And if that works and we're okay with it, let's try the next step. It doesn't have to always be all or nothing. You can take steps in between in order to try to satisfy both people in the relationship, earn the trust to decrease the fear. I mean, that is what this is usually about. Insecurities that somebody, is going to stay and be here for all the hard stuff. Mm-hmm. So think about that. It's okay to not be okay sometimes. It's okay to say you're scared. It's okay to say that I'm hyper dependent because I grew up in A, B, and C situation, or I was in a horrible relationship, and so now I'm going to do the polar opposite, right? I relied on this person completely. I got totally screwed, and so now I'm not going to rely on anybody but myself because I'm not going to let myself down. Where I get it, the bigger issue is that we need to work on what? We need to work on you. We need to work on your fears. We need to heal what was broken. When we can do that, we can move forward and other things will just very naturally fall into place. As my trauma journey went through, as I continue to heal, I have been so far out of my trauma, the actual act of it, you would think, oh, no problem. It's a journey. And sometimes it pops up out of nowhere. But because I have worked so hard throughout all these years, I have a toolbox of things to utilize to help me cope, to ground me back to where I need to be so that I don't take too many steps backwards. I let myself feel it and I move forward. I also have learned how to communicate with my significant other and let them know, like, hey, this is going on right now. Or, hey, in the opposite, it doesn't even have to be a negative. Like, I want you to know, like, 5 years ago, I couldn't say this to you, but I'm going to say it to you now. It doesn't even really need to be a conversation. I just want to let you know this is where my head used to be, and this is where it's at now. And I love that. I do that all the time, actually, to my husband, now that I'm thinking about it. I've done it a lot in the last few years. And I love that for us. I love that for me. I love it for all the clients who put in the work. All the people that put in the work. Therapy's hard. Working on ourselves is hard. It just seems so much easier to just rely on ourselves, right? People have to earn that. They have to earn the trust. And sometimes we have to take a chance on people. But there are good people out there. And if we choose to be in relationships, then we are making a choice to trust and allow some of that hyper independence to decrease and to heal from the inside, to heal that heart, that mind, that brain, and let it know you're safe. You don't have to be scared anymore. You can rely on this person you have chosen to be in your life. Because remember, if you do have children in your house, they're watching. I'm guilty of a lot of things that I went through. I am. I'm so guilty of saying, "Oh, that's mine. That was I'm going to pay for that." I did that a lot a long time ago. We've gotten better. We've gotten better. Because I really do want my kids to understand that it's a unit and you can trust somebody. I want them to know that dad and mom trust each other and we're a team. This is our money. This is our home. These are, when we make mistakes, they're our mistakes. Like we are a team. We're united 100%. I want them to be able to rely on their significant other if they choose to be in a relationship. I don't typically just push the agenda like you have to be in one. I definitely don't. But if they do choose to be in one, I want them to have that trust in their heart that this is how this can be, right? It's not a bad way to be at all. Being hyper independent doesn't have to be a negative, doesn't have to be a positive, but I think we have to find a balance. That's just my opinion. Everybody's opinion about this, I'm sure, is very different, and I respect that. I love having these conversations. I love allowing people the safe space to be able to verbalize these things because, to be honest with you, so often when we go out into society, people can't see past what their own opinion is and they just want to argue. I love to pick apart certain topics, really, like all of them, all the different scenarios, and like dissect why being, given everything in life could put you on this path, or being given nothing in life could put you on this path, or this path, or this path. And then what do you do? How do you break the generational cycle if it had continued? And generational cycles could be anything. Anything. It could just be being bad with money. It could be drugs. It could be abuse. Um, it could be anything. You can break it and you can be your best self. You are that powerful. All right, you guys. That was episode 5 of Let's Talk About It, being hyper independent. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day.